I still remember the way my boss said it, like a joke he'd practiced in the mirror. "Bonuses are for management only," he grinned, tapping the conference table with his gold pen. "But hey, maybe if you work really hard next quarter, you'll get one of those shiny company mugs instead." The room laughed. I didn't. It was Friday, the last meeting before Christmas break. Everyone knew the bonuses were coming, or at least everyone except us. We were the analysts, the quiet ones who stayed late fixing the mistakes made by the very people now drinking champagne in the conference room. My name's Ethan. I'm 33, single, and at that point I'd been working at Rexon Financial for almost 6 years. I loved my job once. Numbers made sense when people didn't. I built forecasting models that saved the company hundreds of thousands. But to Mark, my boss, I was just the spreadsheet guy. That day, when he said it, I felt something inside me snap. Not loudly, but cleanly, like a wire pulled too tight. I smiled politely, the way you do when you can't afford not to, but my jaw hurt from holding it in. After the meeting, people crowded the break room, laughing about vacation plans and the holiday surprise that upper management got. I didn't join them. I sat at my desk, watching Mark walk out with a bottle of Macallan under his arm, one of the corporate gifts. I knew exactly how much that bottle cost. It was roughly equivalent to my entire Christmas bonus last year. This year, I was getting nothing. When I packed up that night, I noticed something odd on the shared drive, a folder named Project Aurora, one I'd never seen before. It was restricted, but someone had mistakenly left the permissions open for 30 minutes before they corrected it, just long enough for me to glimpse what was inside. Quarterly reports, vendor contracts, transaction ledgers, numbers that didn't add up. At first, I thought it was just a mistake. Maybe someone duplicated an entry. But as I scrolled, I realized these weren't small discrepancies. They were deliberate, fake vendor accounts tied to shell companies, all routed through management oversight. And at the center of it all, Mark's signature. I remember sitting there, the office empty around me, the hum of the fluorescent lights like a pulse in my ears. I wasn't a hacker or an investigator. I was just good with data. But that night, curiosity burned hotter than reason. I copied a few files, not everything, just enough to understand. I told myself it was for clarity, but deep down, I already knew something was rotten. The following Monday, Mark called me into his office. "Ethan, buddy," he said, leaning back in his chair, fake warmth dripping from every syllable. "I saw you accessing restricted files last week. You know that's not allowed." He said it with a smirk, not anger, like he'd been waiting for me to slip. I froze. He wasn't supposed to know? It must have flagged it. I began, but he cut me off. "Relax, I'm not firing you. Yet. But you might want to be careful about where you click. Wouldn't want you to accidentally end up on the unemployment list before the new year. Right?" He laughed. I didn't. That night I sat in my apartment, staring at my laptop screen, replaying his words. I knew what he was doing. Intimidation. The same tactic he used on everyone beneath him. But this time, it didn't work. This time something else took root inside me. Not fear, resolve. The more I thought about it, the more it made sense. The bonuses weren't for management only because they earned them. They were protecting the scheme, inflating vendor invoices, diverting funds, creating a slush account that only a few people knew about, and I just stumbled into it. I didn't go to HR. HR was management. I didn't go to the police either. Not yet. I spent the next week doing what I did best, analyzing, quietly, carefully, methodically. Every night, after everyone left, I stayed, extracting, cross-referencing, documenting. I traced fake invoices to non-existent contractors. The total grew from thousands to hundreds of thousands. Then one night, around 2 a.m., I found it, the final thread. A payment batch labeled Year-End Incentives. $1.2 million, disguised as consulting fees to an offshore account. Mark's name was on the authorization line. I remember leaning back, staring at the screen, feeling something strange. It wasn't triumph. It wasn't even anger. It was clarity, the kind that hits you when all the puzzle pieces finally fit together. For 6 years, I'd been invisible. Now, invisibility was my greatest weapon. I made copies of everything, encrypted, time-stamped, verified. Then I wiped the access trail clean. The next morning, I walked into the office as usual. Mark greeted me with that same smug grin. "Morning, champ. Don't forget. Management lunch at noon. Sorry, invite only." I smiled back. Wouldn't miss it for the world. He laughed, not realizing what I meant. Because by the time they sat down for that lunch, I'd already sent everything. The reports, the transactions, the account links, to someone who would miss it for the world, the company's external auditors, and all I had to do now was wait. The funny thing about revenge is how quiet it starts. There's no thunderclap, no dramatic music, just the sound of coffee being poured, the clicking of keyboards, and the faint hum of fluorescent lights, while the clock drags itself toward another Monday. That Monday felt no different. No one knew that by the end of the week, half the senior management at Rexton Financial would be on the front page of the ledger. No one except me. At 8:47 a.m., Mark strutted into the office wearing a navy suit that looked 2 pay grades above his salary. "Big week, team," he said, clapping his hands. "We're finalizing numbers for the annual report. Let's make sure everything looks perfect for the auditors." Perfect, I nearly laughed. He didn't know that the auditors already had everything: the fake vendor accounts, the diverted funds, the trail leading straight to his desk. All I had to do was act normal, which to my surprise came easily. Years of being overlooked had made me a master of invisibility. "Ethan," he called from his office door, "you're coming to the meeting with the external auditors, right?" That stopped me. He'd never invited me to those before. "Sure," I said. "Wouldn't miss it." He smiled, not realizing how literal that promise was. When the auditors arrived, Mark turned on his charm like a faucet. He joked, flattered, and even threw in a few humble brags about team efficiency. I sat in the corner, pretending to take notes. The lead auditor, a woman named Clara, met my eyes once, just once, and gave the faintest nod. Message received. The rest of the meeting was a blur of spreadsheets and jargon. When it ended, Mark slapped me on the shoulder. "Good work in there, Ethan. Maybe I'll even recommend you for a small bonus next year." A small bonus. I smiled because in a few days he'd be lucky to get a severance package. That evening I took the long way home. I didn't want to celebrate, not yet. I stopped at a diner near the highway, ordered black coffee, and opened my laptop. The email from Clara was waiting. "We've received your documentation. Preliminary review confirms major irregularities. Do not contact anyone internally. We'll handle the rest." No signature, no pleasantries, just that. I closed the laptop and sat there for a long time, listening to the hiss of the coffee machine and the soft murmur of conversations. I wasn't sure what I felt. Relief, maybe, or something closer to control. A feeling I hadn't had in years. The next morning, the first crack appeared. At 9:12 a.m., an internal memo hit everyone's inbox. Due to a compliance review, all vendor transactions are temporarily suspended. Further instructions to follow. The finance floor went quiet. Mark stormed out of his office, face already pink. "Who the hell paused my accounts?" No one answered. He dialed his phone, barked at someone, slammed the receiver down. 10 minutes later, the CFO appeared. Calm, polished, unreadable. "Mark, I need you in my office," she said. "What's going on, Dana?" She didn't answer, just turned and walked away. He followed. 30 minutes later, his office door opened again. He walked out looking like someone had drained all the color from his face. He didn't speak to anyone, didn't make eye contact, just grabbed his jacket and left. By lunch, the rumors started. Temporary suspension, audit irregularities. System breach. I kept my head down. When people asked if I'd heard anything, I shrugged. No idea. That afternoon, Clara called. "You're clear," she said. "Everything checks out. We'll be escalating this immediately." "How bad?" I asked. "Bad enough that the board's already convening an emergency session. You should probably stay home tomorrow." "Why?" She paused. "Because things are about to get loud." She wasn't exaggerating. The next morning, my phone exploded with messages. Co-workers, friends, even a few from unknown numbers. They escorted Mark out, CFO too. The company's under investigation for fraud. By noon, the Ledger had the headline, "Rexton Financial Faces. $1.2 million accounting scandal. Multiple executives suspended pending inquiry." I stared at the article for a long time. They'd quoted a source close to the investigation who described a sophisticated internal embezzlement scheme uncovered through data anomalies. That was me, but my name wasn't there. I'd made sure of that. That night, I went for a walk. It was snowing, the kind that makes city streets quiet, soft. I passed the Rexton building, its windows dark except for the top floor, Mark's floor. Two silhouettes moved inside, one pacing, one sitting still. I didn't stop. I just kept walking. When I got home, there was a voicemail waiting. It was Mark. His voice was tight, panicked. "Ethan, listen. I don't know what's happening, but the auditors are asking about access logs, and your name came up. You need to call me. We can fix this. Together." Together. I deleted the message. The next morning, HR sent an official company-wide statement. Following an internal and external review, several senior employees have been terminated effective immediately due to financial misconduct. Operations will continue under interim leadership. That was the polite corporate way of saying, "We caught the thieves." The floor buzzed with nervous relief. People whispered in corners, traded theories, pretended not to be terrified. The atmosphere shifted, subtly but completely. I stayed silent through it all. No one suspected me. Why would they? I was just the quiet guy in the corner, the one who made spreadsheets sing but never raised his voice. By Friday, a new interim director had taken over, a woman named Alyssa Chen. She called me into her office that afternoon. "I've reviewed your performance reports," she said. "Frankly, I don't know how this department ran without you." "It didn't," I replied before I could stop myself. She smiled, just slightly. "I figured as much." She leaned forward, lowering her voice. "Between us, whatever happened this week, it saved the company. You'll have my full support moving forward." I nodded, but I didn't feel triumphant. Not yet. Because I knew something she didn't. The $1.2 million wasn't just missing. It was somewhere, and I knew exactly where. The week after Mark's firing was like watching a storm clear. The air felt cleaner, sharper, but you could still smell the lightning. People smiled again, but it was the kind of smile you wear when you don't know who's still watching. Mark was gone. The CFO, too. Several senior managers were on leave pending investigation. I'd expected chaos, but Rexton didn't collapse. It adapted. It always did. Alyssa, the interim director, had stepped into the role like she'd been waiting for it her whole life. She was calm, decisive, and, most importantly, she asked questions. Real ones. Who handled these accounts? Who built this forecasting system? Who can I trust? Every answer pointed to the same person. Me. But here's the thing about trust. It's a currency, and I had learned exactly how to spend it. When Alyssa offered me a promotion, interim operations lead, with a raise that would have made me grin 6 months ago, I accepted with a quiet thank you. But I wasn't interested in climbing the same ladder that had just burned half the office. I had another plan. Because remember that $1.2 million? The money they'd funneled through fake accounts. It hadn't vanished into the ether. I'd traced every cent, and it led to a network of offshore entities. Not just Mark's doing. There were others, bigger names, names that hadn't been mentioned in the investigation yet. The files were sitting in a secured drive, encrypted 3 layers deep, and I held the only key. I spent the next few weeks playing the perfect employee, Quiet, efficient, cooperative. I showed up early, left late, never questioned a directive. It was the same act I'd perfected for 6 years, only now I was doing it for me. Late one evening, when most of the office lights were out, I got a call. Unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. "Ethan," the voice said. Male, calm, older. "This is Richard Lang from the board. I understand you've been instrumental during this transition." I didn't respond right away. Board members didn't call analysts. Ever. "I'd like to meet," he continued. "Off the record." We met the next morning at a cafe 3 blocks from the office. He wore a gray suit that cost more than my car, but his eyes, sharp, cold, told me this wasn't a friendly chat. "Let's not waste time," he said, stirring his coffee once, then setting the spoon aside. "We're aware the auditors were tipped off internally." I said nothing. He leaned closer. "I don't care who it was. What I do care about is the company's stability. We can't afford another scandal." He slid an envelope across the table. "Thick. Too thick for a thank you card. Consider this a gesture of appreciation," he said, "and a reminder that loyalty goes both ways." I didn't touch the envelope. "Is this supposed to be hush money?" He smiled. "It's supposed to be incentive." I left it on the table. Didn't even look inside. But later that night, I checked my email, and there it was. A digital deposit from an anonymous account. $50,000. He was testing me, seeing if I'd bite. I didn't return the money. I didn't spend it either. I just moved it into a secondary account I'd opened under a company, alias 3 weeks prior, the same alias that controlled a dormant vendor shell, one that existed only on paper. And that's when the real plan began. See, revenge doesn't always mean destroying someone. Sometimes it means making them destroy themselves. Slowly, elegantly, inevitably. Over the next month, I rebuilt Rexton's financial model from scratch. Alyssa thought I was cleaning up old code. The board thought I was tightening compliance. In reality, I was inserting silent triggers, digital breadcrumbs that would expose every hidden transaction automatically if someone tried to replicate the old fraud pattern. In other words, I was building a trap. Meanwhile, rumors spread that Mark had fled the country. Some said he'd cashed out early investments and vanished to the Caribbean. Others whispered that he was cooperating with investigators. I didn't believe either. Mark wasn't smart enough to vanish, and he wasn't brave enough to confess. Still, every time I left the office late at night, I had the same uneasy feeling that someone was watching. It wasn't paranoia. 2 weeks later, it became fact. I caught him outside my apartment building, half hidden behind a row of parked cars. Mark. Thinner, disheveled, his expensive suits replaced with a cheap jacket and a nervous tic. "Ethan!" he called when he saw me. "Wait." I didn't. He jogged up, breath visible in the cold. "Listen, I know what you did." I stared at him. "You're going to have to be more specific. You turned them against me. You sent those files. You think you're the hero here? You don't know what they're capable of." "They?" I repeated. He lowered his voice. "Lang, the board. The offshore accounts weren't mine, Ethan. I was the middleman. They used me. I took the fall." His eyes darted around, wild and desperate. "You think this is over? It's not. They'll find someone else to pin it on. Maybe you." I almost pitied him. Almost. "You should probably stop talking," I said quietly, "before you make things worse for yourself." He grabbed my arm. "You don't understand. They'll bury you." I pulled free. "Then I'll dig deeper." He stared at me like he didn't recognize the man in front of him. Maybe he didn't. I wasn't the quiet analyst anymore. I was the one writing the story now. When I went upstairs, I opened my laptop and activated the failsafe I'd built into the system. A sequence that would monitor every executive transaction across all departments. If they tried to hide money again, the system would alert me instantly. 3 days later, it did. Same pattern, different names, and one of them, Richard Lang. It wasn't about Mark anymore. This was bigger, deeper. The rot hadn't started with him. It started at the top. I leaned back, staring at the screen as realization set in. Mark was right. But the difference between him and me was simple. He panicked. I planned. And this time, I wasn't just going to expose them. I was going to own them. Power doesn't always come from titles or money or corner offices. Sometimes it comes from patience, the kind that sits quietly in the dark, watching the people who laughed at you slowly light their own fuse. And I had plenty of patience. For 3 months, I said nothing. I went to work, smiled during meetings, built reports, nodded when the board praised our swift recovery. Behind the scenes, my system watched everything. Every transfer, every vendor, every offshore transaction disguised as consulting fees. They didn't realize they'd hired their own executioner. The trigger came one Thursday afternoon. Lang had approved a $1.2 million operational expenditure through a consulting firm in Singapore, one that, according to the registry, had dissolved 2 years ago. I didn't even have to dig. The system flagged it automatically like a heartbeat skipping a beat. I remember sitting at my desk, the hum of the office fading around me, realizing this was the same amount, 1.2 million, that had destroyed Mark. The same figure that had started everything. Some people never learn. I could have reported it immediately. Instead, I let it breathe. I watched where the money went next, funneled through a chain of accounts, until it landed in one registered under a name I knew too well, Rexon Partners Limited, a shell tied directly to 2 board members. Lang wasn't acting alone. He was cleaning up, consolidating. And now I had proof. But I didn't want another headline scandal. Not this time. This time I wanted control, the kind that doesn't make noise but changes everything silently. That weekend I drafted a report. Polished, professional, irrefutable. I added logs, timestamps, and screenshots. Then I sent 2 copies, one to the independent auditors who'd handled the first investigation, and another, encrypted, to Lang himself. No subject line, no message, just the data. By Monday, the company felt off. The energy was tight, brittle. Executives whispered in hallways, closed doors faster than usual. By noon, Lang's assistant announced he was working remotely indefinitely. He never came back. The board convened an emergency meeting that afternoon. Alyssa called me in later, her face pale but composed. "You knew about this," she said softly. "I suspected," I replied. She studied me for a long moment. "You realize what you've done, right? You didn't just expose corruption. You've changed how this company operates." "Good," I said. "Ethan, they want you to take over compliance entirely. Full autonomy." It should have felt like victory, but all I felt was quiet. I took the position, but not for power or recognition. I took it to make sure no one like Mark or Lang could ever touch this place again. I redesigned every internal process, every financial protocol. Within 6 months, Rexton Financial wasn't the same company. It was cleaner, leaner, honest, because it had no choice. And through it all, I kept one file untouched, hidden, the same $1.2 million transaction, the final evidence. You see, when the system flagged that account, I did something unexpected. I rerouted 1%, just 1%, of that illegal transfer into a holding account. Enough to trace, not enough to alert. That 1% sat there quietly, accumulating interest under an anonymous name. Mine. Not because I needed the money, but because I wanted the irony. The same number that represented greed, fraud, and arrogance now existed as a ghost reminder, a receipt of poetic balance. But karma wasn't finished. 3 months later, I received an email from an unknown address. No greeting, no signature. Just, "They took everything. I tried to warn you. Mark." I never replied. But later that week, I saw his name again. This time in an article buried deep on page 7 of the Financial News. Former executive arrested in connection to offshore tax investigation. Apparently Mark had resurfaced, trying to sell insider information to a competing firm. The authorities had intercepted the deal. he was facing a lengthy sentence. Lang, on the other hand, disappeared completely. His properties were sold, his accounts frozen, his reputation erased. The board never spoke his name again. And me? I stayed exactly where I'd always been, in the quiet. One evening, as I was locking up my office, Alyssa stopped by the door. "You ever think about taking credit?" she asked. "For what?" "For saving this company. For everything." I smiled. "No. Some stories work better when no one knows the author." She nodded like she understood. And maybe she did. Outside, the city lights stretched in long reflections across the glass towers. For the first time in years, I didn't feel invisible. Not because anyone saw me, but because I didn't need them to. Before heading home, I logged into the secure drive one last time. I opened the folder labeled Project Aurora. The original one, the mistake that started it all. Inside, among the archived contracts and falsified ledgers, was a single new document, a system-generated note. All accounts verified, no anomalies detected. Compliance, integrity, 100%. It should have been satisfying. It was, but in a quiet, bittersweet way, because revenge, once it's complete, leaves a silence of its own. I closed the laptop, turned off the lights, and left without looking back. The next morning, Rexton Financial announced a new initiative. Employee profit-sharing program. Bonuses for everyone. Not just management. The headline on the internal portal made me laugh out loud. I didn't need a mug or a medal. That policy, that one change, was the real revenge. Later that day, Alyssa stopped by my desk. "You see the announcement?" she asked. "I did?" She smiled. "You know what they're calling it." I shook my head. "The Ethan Clause." For a moment, I didn't know whether to laugh or feel something deeper. But as I looked around the office, at the people smiling, genuinely this time, I realized that the story had come full circle. Bonuses were no longer for management only. And the company that once tried to bury me now bore my name in its foundation. That was worth more than $1.2 million. That was justice.